hope
I
it's
agree
recording. I
with you.
press record.
I agree with you. The ability to record ultimately has to come. The ability, our ability to use the students' names will depend on them giving us the authorization to do that. Now,
Right.
the way in which some of these systems, especially the Zoom system in itself, works is by blocking out the names completely. So I don't know if your system does that. Probably it does not, because you're operating from a different software. But this is the way in which the college has asked us to operate,
Mm-hmm.
to verify with the student if they're okay with their name being on. If not, we delete the name or we skip through their intervention.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about using it publicly. I just wanted to
Okay.
have it, for me to go back and reflect on. I will make a suggestion for you though, if you just tip your camera down a little bit.
No
And
doubt.
you'll
Yes,
see.
yes, you're right. You're right.
There you go. Beautiful. There you are.
Oh,
Now
we
you're
have,
right in the middle of
yeah,
it.
thank you very much. And we have Ingrid Centurion's son, I think it must be.
Yes, hello.
Wow, hi.
No, I just decided to say.
Oh yeah, my son. Yeah, he
I
loved
thought
it.
the background looked familiar.
Oh.
Hi.
Oh, excellent. Kathy is on too. That's excellent. That's excellent. That's really, really good. So yes, I mean, there are a lot of things we can discuss. And number one is I just want to make an announcement that this book is now edited, or has been edited by me. And it's pretty much the same book, but it's just perhaps a little easier to read, simply because some punctuation has been made easier to read. And I've sent it out to everybody in the class, in both of my classes, the ethics and the philosophy class. And I'm going to send it to tomorrow's class, which, by the way, they will have access to the tape tomorrow. So you see, we're doing something very good for that class as well. And so what I want to say is that this this interaction will be helpful, and the reading the book will be helpful because it's part of the final paper. Okay, the final paper has some really, really important things you could borrow from Lisa Romano's life coach advice and theories, so to speak, or at least views, perspectives. So that's what I want you to know, and it's a privilege to have you, Lisa, with us. And I was wondering if you could, how you would like to start. I mean, I just, if you want me to introduce you some more, I can, but I think maybe you want to start off also just right now.
Sure. So obviously my name's Lisa, and just a little background. I grew up in a dysfunctional home, and just put it out there. And I didn't know it. So there was a lot of dysfunction between my parents, even though we had the white picket fence and mom was always home and dad came home every night at 5 o'clock. It was very dysfunctional. But I had nothing that I could point my finger to and say, that's what's wrong. Daddy hits mommy. I didn't have that. Or mommy's an alcoholic. I didn't have that. But still, within me, I felt like something was wrong. And so I grew up feeling basically like I'm an alien, like I don't belong here. I felt very unloved and disconnected. But anytime I tried to express that, I was called a drama queen. I was told, you're just looking for attention. So I was shamed even more, which only made me retreat further into myself, and basically a lot of dissociating, meaning I detached from my emotions. I just didn't know how to deal with them. But definitely grew up feeling like there was something wrong with me. I didn't know what that something was, and it was certainly all my fault. This led into being bullied at school because, I didn't feel like I fit in. I know I gave that off. It was very difficult for me to make friends because I was so insecure. And this led into me developing eating disorders. I would dissociate by counting. I would memorize license plates on the way to school. I did all sorts of things that essentially helped me dissociate from my feelings. And eventually developed a love addiction, if you will, codependency, married my ex-husband, and found myself in a very dysfunctional marriage after 12 years. Well, it was always dysfunctional, but after 12 years, 13 years, I couldn't take it anymore. My body was failing. I knew something was wrong. I went to a therapist and he said, "You're not crazy, but you are codependent." And that set me on the path to figuring out what is this codependency thing, which I think is why Dr. Gendry resonates with my work, because it ends up being a question of, well, who am I? And why am I here? And whose life am I living? Whose thoughts are in my head? Whose beliefs are in my head? Why do I do what I do? Why do I think what I think? Why am I afraid to do that? Why am I not afraid to do this other thing? So really, whose thoughts are in my head, and by who's running the ship? You know, like what's going on? And as I began to investigate codependency, I basically came to the realization that I was not living a free will life. My subconscious mind was running on a program that my brain was wired to live on autopilot. There's actually something called the default mode network that sits behind your eyes. It's literally a mechanism by which a human being can be born and never really be fully conscious. Your breathing is autonomic or automatic. Much of what you think is automatic, and it's subconscious. So coming to this point in my life where I realized I was codependent meant that I was asleep. And that freaked me the hell out, because I was like, well, who the hell is doing the thinking in my head if it's not me? Who am I? And that's really, it led me to the desire to help people, specifically adult children of alcoholics, because I realized that my parents were adult children of alcoholics and they were unconscious and they didn't know they were wounded. And so all they did was transfer their experiences onto my brother, my sister, and I. And what was bonkers for my brother and my sister and myself was we couldn't say mommy has a drinking problem. We couldn't say daddy has a drinking problem. We just assumed that everything that was wrong, the disconnect, the inability to have a nurturing relationship with them, the inability to feel loved and to feel seen, we didn't have it. So we assumed it was our fault and there was something wrong with us. And all I wanted to do is teach people about this concept, like you're not awake if you're not questioning your thoughts, if you're not thinking about who am I, if you don't know how to feel your feelings, if you are not making decisions based on this is what I think and this is what I feel, I know why I feel it, then you're not as awake as you think you are. And to me, that is a tragedy, to be born and to not know that you can question the way that you think. And so here we are.
Wow, excellent, excellent, excellent. I just jotted down a few words that I know you've used before, but you're using it for me in a sort of new way, or a way that actually resonates. You said that you, as a child, were constantly dissociating from your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And this inability, and you could not see that you were repressing or dissociating from your emotions, right? I mean, that's what you
Correct.
said. And it's because of one word that was given to you by the first psychotherapist, was it, that you saw, right? Who said you are a codependent, and that's what you said again.
I saw at least four therapists before I found this one. He was the only
Sorry.
one. Life happens. Life happens. Yeah, but he was the only one who said to me, who asked me a couple of really, all the other therapists, which is why I resonate with the work of Hamlet, Hamlet or Shakespeare. I resonate with Hamlet because, Hamlet is all about to be or not to be. Am I going to thrash against what is, or am I going to accept what is? So all the other therapists that I had tried to talk me out of what I was feeling. They were uncomfortable that I felt the way I felt, and it made them uncomfortable. So I think what they did was they tried to make themselves more uncomfortable by talking me out of how I feel.
Oh, wow. What a strange connection. So you're trying to make yourself be more comfortable with who you are, and by becoming aware of unconscious thoughts that were in the backdrop or in the background or in, sort of running behind the programming behind that was influencing everything. And they're saying, no, 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 we don't want to do that. We want you to do something else that you don't know about.
Mhm.
And I mean, it seems to me you're paying them to fail you at this point.
I don't think, I'm hoping that the mental health field is moving in a different direction, which is please teach people to accept how they feel.
I have a question. At what age did you see all these therapists?
I started going to therapy probably when I was about 26, 27,
Okay.
because I was developing severe anxiety after the birth of my daughter. They told me that my daughter was going to die, that she had cancer, don't get too close to her. And it was just too much for me to handle. And I started to have like PTSD responses. And at that point, therapists were telling me, well, just give it up to God. One Christian counselor said, just give it to God. And I was just like, not the answer. Now I just feel more shame because where is God? Like, okay, where are his feet so I can take my troubles? And exactly what are my troubles? I felt very patronized because he didn't know how to help me, quite frankly. And then my ex-husband and I went to various marital counselors, and in counseling, I was actually told if I said I don't feel connected to him, the therapist would say something like, well, maybe you just don't appreciate the things that he is doing for you. So it's like, you're not hearing me. Like, I've been married for 10, 11, 12 years. I'm telling you that there's a disconnect between the two of us, and you're shaming me again. They didn't just seemed, now that I stand back and I look and how I life coach, my job is to let you hate your mother. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I'm not going to tell you you shouldn't hate your mother because it makes me uncomfortable that you have these uncomfortable feelings. I need to be there for you. Let's talk so that you can be there for you. So by the time I found the last therapist who kind of like said, asked me if you keep, it was 10 years later. So in between that time, I had 4 or 5 therapists and finally found him at the age of 36. And he asked me, go ahead.
Yeah, and no, because I know some people right now that are really struggling, and I'm trying to recommend the best therapist for that person. And she's a female, and that's why I want to ask you, when you start looking for therapists, are there certain area or specialty you need to look for now? Because I know it's
I
getting
don't think a social worker is the way to go. Nothing against social workers, but you need someone who's trauma informed.
Okay.
In my opinion, does CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. So if they're a good cognitive behavioral therapist, I think you have to be informed. You've got to walk into a therapist's office and say, look, I have these issues and I need help figuring them out. And if you're the type of therapist that's going to try to talk me out of how I feel, you're not the therapist for me.
What you just said, cognitive behavioral therapy, is sort of a good word or expression to ask of a potential therapist, and saying, do you appreciate the fact that therapy has to do 2 things: sort of make me understand and make me absorb what it is that went wrong, and then help me change the habits so that I become, I flourish. So the combination of cognition and action.
Correct.
And this is really where you just zeroed in with these 3 words: cognitive behavioral therapy. You zeroed in on the major elements of what makes you, I think, a top-notch life coach.
Well, I appreciate that. It's just, it's so deep, Dr. Gendry, because it's when you're having difficulty, lots of times it's tied to your perception of self. In other words, like if you don't feel like you have the faculties or the ability to solve this problem at hand, that affects everything. That affects your emotional state, your mental state, and your behaviors. So it is a cognitive issue, but it's also an identity issue.
Right. Oh, absolutely. It's an identity issue. Absolutely.
We have to really help people return, and it's a process. What I try to do is I accept people where they are. They feel broken, and they don't trust themselves. And the first step is to how can I help you accept where you are? And then I want to help you accept how you got there so that you feel like, wow, I make sense, which increases your ability to improve the way you see yourself. This allows you to feel a little bit more confident that you have some control over future behaviors. So it's cognitive, yes, but I think lots of times in therapies, it's the identity, who you think you are, is missed. If I understand who you think you are, I can predict the outcome of your life.
Sure, sure, sure. No,
Because
absolutely,
it's predictable.
absolutely. No, I mean, I think you've touched upon a number of themes that I touch upon too by doing philosophy and ethics. I mean, these are fundamental things. Who am I? You know,
Yep.
who do I want to be? Who are my heroes? Who are the villains that I run into?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I keep away from the villains? And how do I, improve myself by being engaged with people that are making a positive difference, that I really understand are making a positive difference. And these would be role models in various different capacities. It
Mm-hmm.
could be a professional capacity, it could be as a friend and as a sort of mentor of sorts, or it could be as a wise person who imparts their overall wisdom on how to deal with just about everything.
I think the other question is like, we ask people, who am I? But I think a deeper question is, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
And who programmed you or conditioned you to believe in these ideas about self? Because who we are, if I would, that was my issue. Who I thought I was no good. So I think a better question to ask people is, who taught you to believe that you are who you think you are? So now it creates some space between my perception of self, which is shame-based,
Right.
and the real me.
Right.
Because that's really, who am I? And I think a lot of people struggle with this. I wrote you about Nietzsche. Like, here he wanted to be this Superman, but he had all these problems with his mother and women.
Right. Right.
And even though he knew it was possible, he had that part of the equation. It is possible to be great.
I'm going to read what you wrote. I like it. Nietzsche believed in a Superman, but could not become his ideal. He suffered greatly. He hated his mother and his sister. Women rejected him. He empathized with great suffering and even identified with it. What a terrible existence, to know it is possible to become the Superman, but to be unable to know how to do so. He despised Christianity, and with good reason. He saw Christians as the antithesis of his Superman. In his view, he believed, if I'm getting this right, that Christians were weak-minded. Therefore, this may have made it impossible for him to believe in anything beyond himself, which he knew and could feel was broken.
Mm-hmm.
I would say yes to everything. The only nuance I would bring is the fact that he thought that Christianity had evolved into a flattened version of it, which was now picked up by the socialists. He absolutely despised the socialists because they were taking everything from anybody and then giving it to anybody else, and they were creating chaos on a massive scale. I mean, he hated the French Revolution for that reason. But that's So he disliked the version of Christianity that he was familiar with because his father was a pastor. He had lost his father very early. But of course, his mother and sister were reiterating this veneration for that man who maybe he would have had an issue with no matter what.
Right.
So it was a combination of disliking Christianity for some specific reasons.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly. Ultimately, they boil down to the fact that men are made too weak, and women are empowered to weaken the men. So he had a rather strange, a certain way of looking at gender roles, saying basically guys should be willing to do things differently than women. Okay, So he had a gender binary system that was very strong, which I think a lot of us today would not agree with, although we, I think, are capable of saying, there are some people who may want to go to war. It's traumatic going to war, but if they want to go to war, let them defend us who are not so willing to go to war. Maybe we have to learn to defend ourselves also. So that's where he's coming out of. But you're right, he ended up with this Superman thing, and he greatly suffered. He hated his mother and sister, with good reason, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think when I think about him, I think I get this sense, and I could be wrong, I get this sense that he knew there was the potential and the possibility to overcome.
Correct. He did know that. I agree with that.
And he just, because of trauma, because of childhood programming, because he doesn't understand that he's both conscious and unconscious at the same time, possibly. But when you feel stained by your childhood experience, the who you think you are is defective.
Right.
So that's why I think when we ask someone, who are you? I think we can't ask that question because so many of us struggle with trauma and shame.
Right.
We'll talk about it. So I'll tell, well, who do I think? I'll give you a nice cleaned up version because I know that's what you want to hear, but I'll never tell you that I don't think that I'm good enough and that I'm ashamed of myself.
That's right.
I think, so if that's the truth, then what we should be asking is, who do you think you are based on who you were taught you could be or should be?
Right. That's right. That's exactly right. And that's the hardest confession to make, basically. Who do you really think you are? What do you think where do you really, in your own estimate, where do you fit?
I think the question, because to me, I'm always trying to figure out because it's so profound for me, right? So this idea that I wasn't as conscious as I thought I was, and that my marriage was literally a rinse, recycle, repeat of my mother's own marriage. Like, I married my mother, and then I stepped into her shoes and became her. Like, what? How did that happen?
Right.
So when you ask a question like, well, who do you think you are based on what the people that raised you taught you were? I think that kind of a question creates a space where it's like, wait a minute. Now there's this moment of consciousness. Consciousness is born. Like, wow, wow, what do you mean? Like, yeah, like, you might not be who you think you are, and that's okay, and it's not your fault. But there is this version of you that is the result of your environment. And it's most likely not a fair version of you. And it's certainly not the end of the story. You can become anything. And so I think I'm always trying to give birth to consciousness when I talk to someone. Always trying to get them to give birth.
It's the midwifery of the new being, of the newer being, the new being, which, by the way, it's a very old theme, but a very existential theme of Socrates. Socrates viewed himself as doing what his mother was doing. She was a midwife, and he saw himself as essentially giving birth to the real good ideas, the real good decisions, the real good assessments of people's, life goals and their thoughts, and making them compatible with other people, making sure that they were not self-contradicting, they were not abusive of others while they thought they were just so perfect,
Right.
Essentially, all of that, the midwifery of the authentic person, the true self, the true authentic person. This is where you connect with the great tradition of Western philosophy, I think. I mean, you kind of know it, but I'm telling you, I think it's wonderful to be able to articulate those thoughts.
Yeah, I appreciate
So
it.
I just had a question for Lisa Romano.
Sure.
So I just wanted to ask you, how would you, as a professional, as a life person, consider yourself a proper role model? I don't know, do you have kids, children?
Yeah, I have three. I have three of my own and three stepchildren.
Okay, nice. So despite everything you went through in the past, how would you consider yourself as a good role model today towards your children? Or
Is
just
how or what do what makes me, or what would I define as a how
yes.
I think that, you know, to me, the most important thing in life, or one of them, is that you live your life, that you come face to face with what's true for you, and you find the courage and the conviction, regardless of what your mother thinks, your father thinks, your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whoever. This is a strong conviction that you have, and you're not hurting anybody, you know, and it contributes to your personal growth. So what's the point of a flower if it doesn't grow and push up through the soil, right? So it doesn't make any sense. You know, trees grow towards the sun, and they grow as big as they can be, which is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to grow, and we're supposed to expand. So I realized that by staying in my marriage, I was not telling my truth. And then I realized that I was modeling that for my children, just like my mother had. My sister, my brother, and I were our mother. My father was highly narcissistic. She was highly codependent. She acquiesced. She nodded yes, even though she meant no. You know, she scudded around the house to make sure that he was happy, and he was never fucking happy. So, and that was our experience. That's what we were supposed to do. That was our conditioning. That she was my model for that. And when I realized that, when consciousness was born, and I realized the consequences of not living a conscious life, I realized that what I did was going to affect my children. And I couldn't live with not changing. I couldn't do it, because I looked at my children, I loved them so much, and I said, if I don't find the courage to speak my truth and follow through and accept the consequences of my actions. I was in nursing school, and the last semester I quit, right? I had severe anxiety at the time, and I was losing my mind. It was during the AIDS epidemic, and I couldn't handle the stress, and I quit. And I always told myself I'd go back, and I never did. And a few years later, I ended up married with a baby, and I was stuck, and I was financially dependent. That was a consequence of my action, right? Even though I was unconscious, it doesn't matter. It was still my stuff. And I knew that if I didn't accept that, and I didn't break through, and I didn't keep going, and I let fear take me over, then I can expect the same for my children one day. And that terrified me. And I decided that I'm going to give my children the best shot I got. And that means that I'm going to do everything I can to change the situation that I am in and live an awakened life, which meant I had to bring them through the fire. And that was those were the worst years of my life. But I know that what I modeled for them was consciousness. What I modeled for them was free will. What I modeled for them was choice. What I modeled for them was authenticity. And I stood there and I let people talk about me, and I let them make up stories, because that's what people do when you get divorced. They talk shit about you, right?
Yeah.
They make up stories, right? They were your best friend on Monday, and now they're talking shit about you on Friday. It's what people do, you know? And so I just said, this is my 15 minutes in the hot seat. This too shall pass. I let it hit me, and I just kept going. So I believe that I'm a good role model, because when I saw something, I was willing to change it. I didn't pull my head back inside my shell. When I saw it, I said, I'm going to change it. And if that's all my children do, I'm very happy. My son got married he was married 2 years ago in March, and he just got divorced he was going through a divorce right now. I'm so happy, Kathy, because he was unhappy.
Yeah.
And it was a sham of a marriage. And for 2 years, he was ashamed of it, because we all told him not to get married. But for 2 years, he tried to prove us all wrong. So his ego was involved. And I, hands off, okay, go figure it out, son, go figure it out. And I shut my mouth and accepted her into our family, knowing that it was a complete sham. And I had faith in myself, and I knew it. I said, I laid down the groundwork for this kid. My mother didn't lead a path for me. My mother died under my father's thumb. I had to create the path. So I know that I did better than her by at least creating the path for my son's liberation and freedom. And so that's why I think, in terms of my children, why I would consider myself a good role model.
Yeah, so that was an awesome explanation, actually. Well, I mean, I pretty much asked that question more because I'm 27. I have two kids. One's 7, and I just had I just had a 5-month-old.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And I would say that I had a very rocky growing up with my mom. It was very rocky. I was kind of like I would say the black sheep because I did everything for my mother. Growing up in a line, I'm Puerto Rican actually. So growing up in a home where my mother obviously had her, her experiences through her life, and she left her home at 13, and she had my older brother at 13. I just feel that even today, me leaving my daughter's father after 6 years of emotional, I would say I have been, and I still feel that I was emotionally abused. Like,
Absolutely.
even if it wasn't physically, it was more emotional. And to this day, I just feel like, to me, I did the right thing. I know I had my daughter, and with this Latin thing, it's more like, oh, it's bad if you leave her. My mom would tell me, it's bad if you leave him because that's the father of your daughter. No one's gonna be him. But then that's more like I call it, it's more like, to them, it's more like I don't know how to explain it. So it's more like a Hispanic thing.
Right.
Like, you have to stay, or it's better if you stay, despite what he's doing to you. And I used to tell her, like, Mom, listen, you don't know what's cooking in the pot. You don't live with me.
That's
He
right.
is a person who shows a character that no one sees it but me behind these closed doors. You don't live with me. So I feel that it's time for me to let go, whether I have to struggle, like you said, through the fire. I have to do it because it's not okay for my daughter to be raised in a household where I'm being abused.
No.
And not physically, but mentally, emotionally. I feel that I still have that in me. I still feel, and I always have my guards up. I always feel like something's gonna happen, or and it sucks because I don't want my daughter to be raised that way. I want her to see that I'm strong, that I'm, I want to be the perfect role model. I left him to give her a better life.
So just so I understand, you're actually separated from him now?
Yes, it's been 4 years.
Good for you. So you got a couple of things that you want to be careful of is that, we're indoctrinated from childhood. We're actually, up until the age of 7, children are in a theta brainwave state, which is a brainwashing state. So you have to understand that parents are hypnotists.
Oh, yeah.
So what they think and what they feel, we absolutely absorb, and we download it at an incredibly quick rate before the age of 3. By the time you're 5, your super ego is intact and is equipped with a narrative. And so the narrative includes familial norms. So if my mother thinks this, that's good. If I think that and my mother doesn't think that, that's bad. I'm bad. Right?
Yes.
So the super ego will try to get the ego to go into alignment with what mom thinks. But that's a complete disowning of your own self.
Yes, and that's the thing. Like I say, I was treated like a maid. I did everything for my mother. And to this day, I feel like I'm the middle. My mom has 5. I'm the middle one. So I do everything. I feel like even to this day, it's like my mom wants to continue to tell me that I did wrong and what I did and my choices and what I've been doing. And I'm like, I think I did perfect. I mean, I understand. And the other side, obviously, my ex-boyfriend, because thank goodness I never married this creature.
Good.
But I just feel that he always tries to put my daughter in the middle. Like, oh, if your mom would have never left me, honey, you would never deal with me not taking you to school or me not doing this. And then I have my 7-year-old, Mommy, but what happened to my dad? Why can't my dad be with us? And it's like, don't put your child in this position. She's so young to understand what happened.
So I think a couple of terms that might help you. This is a form of gaslighting or narcissistic abuse. It's called triangulation.
Yes.
And so what he's trying to do is triangulate your daughter against you. So it's divide and conquer. And so one of the things that you might want to do is just nip it in the bud and say to him, that's not right. I'm not tolerating it. You shouldn't be putting our daughter in the middle. You know exactly why we're not together, and that's enough. you know, because this is a form of psychological abuse towards your daughter
It
as well.
is. Yeah.
It's emotional abuse towards your daughter. Him wanting to, what he's trying to do is mar your daughter's perception of you
Of me. Yeah.
so that he can eventually manipulate her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So, you know, what I would do is I would make a note of it. I kept a journal. My journal was so thick. Every stupid thing he says, write it down. Because I was shocked when I went to family court, not saying you ever have to, but if you ever did, you have it. Family court is not like Supreme Court. Family court judges just have to, just have to believe this much. And they see this kind of stuff all day long. One of the things that my ex-husband said to my daughter when she was 9, if you want mommy to get child support, get out of the van. She didn't want to go with him because in her head, she said it. She says, Daddy has his bad face on. She could tell when he was in a bad mood and she didn't want to get out of the car. And she said, I don't want to get out of the car. And he said, if you want your mommy to get child support, get out of the car.
Oh
Anything to manipulate her and make her feel responsible for what was happening between the two of us. When I went to court and I filled out the sheet, why do you want an order of protection? I wrote that down. And when we went to court, the judge said to me, did he tell your daughter to get out of the car if you wanted child support check? I said, yes, he did, Your Honor. And it was over in 5 minutes. The judge had no patience for the things that he said to me or in front of my children or to my children. I was shocked. It took me 4 years to get there. But I think it's important that you recognize that this is a form of psychological abuse. It has to be called out like immediately, like don't do that. Don't do what? You know what you're doing. Oh, now mommy's going to get mad at me. Yeah, mommy is going to get mad at you because what daddy's doing right now is not right. You're messing with her head. Don't be talking to our daughter about our relationship. You and I don't get along, and that's why we don't live together, and that's why we're having this situation. That's why we have this. And if you keep doing this to our daughter, if you keep talking to her this way, you know, it might not go down the way you want it to.
Right.
And you tell your daughter plain out, like what daddy's doing is wrong. He should not be trying to get you to think poorly of mommy. Daddy's a big boy. He knows why mommy and daddy aren't together.
Right.
Don't let him play you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let him play you. He's playing you.
Seems to me putting this in writing is very important on 2 counts. Number 1, it creates the right narrative, the truthful narrative from the perspective of the victim, in this case, Kathy. Plus, it also helps her daughter to process it, or it will enable her to process it more clearly later on in life when those things are going to come up at some point.
Of course.
And then finally, in the fact that it's in writing, you bring it to family court. And maybe that's what Lisa maybe experienced by saying, hey, Your Honor, I have the evidence here. It happened on such and such a day at such a time when we were in front of, McDonald's or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very clear. The judge was very clear. You know, you cannot speak to your children about their mother. The judge was very clear. It was amazing. And what happened was what it did was my children, it allowed them to understand that when daddy brought mommy's name up, that wasn't good. It wasn't that they weren't good. Daddy was misbehaving. Daddy wasn't following the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So the clearer you are about the rules, the clearer he is about this idea that you know what the rules are. And the clearer he is about the fact that you're going to let your baby know what the rules are.
Right.
You know, that may help the situation. But, you know, getting back to your mom, you got to make sure that you're not seeking her approval or her permission.
Right.
Right. So, mom, that's your life. This is my life. Sometimes, I'm not saying this is the case, but even with Italians, with the Irish, and with the Germans, I can speak to that. Sometimes the mothers who haven't escaped a certain situation, they're uncomfortable when their daughters try to escape.
Yes, that's what I feel. I just feel that's exactly how I feel. Her past, she lives it still. And I'm like, Mom, I understand your life was horrible. I understand that, but you should want the better for your child, you know? Like, I understand my grandmother treated you poorly like a slave, but that doesn't mean you have to treat me like the slave.
No.
And that's what I don't want for my daughter either. It's like, Mom, I don't have to put her to cook at 8 years old. She can get burned. Like, no, I don't have to do that. You did that with me. And to me, that was, I don't know. Yes, thank you, because now I know how to be the great cook, but at this point, I don't think it's important for my daughter to know how to cook right now at 7 years old.
It's not important, but what it might be happening, and I don't think your mother's conscious of it, but if she can get you to get your daughter to do it, then she feels less guilty about
Yes,
forcing you to.
exactly. Yeah, that's
So
exactly right.
it's a form of projection, right? To alleviate her own guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Mom is not aware of it. All you have to do is be aware of it and say, no, I'm not doing it. That's it.
Right.
I don't want that for her. You know, and so it's good that you're aware of it. I think sometimes daughters of moms, we have to be careful about how uncomfortable sometimes our mothers are about our growth. Like
Right.
mothers get very uncomfortable when their daughters start to do better than they did.
Oh yeah, that's exactly. Yep.
So it's like, you're inching ahead of me, because if you inch ahead of me, it's very sad, and that's why your mom sounds very immature emotionally.
Right.
But when a mom is immature and her daughter starts to inch ahead of her, what the mom struggles with is she's leaving me behind. And now I'm going to see my daughter to have the life that I never had, and that makes me feel bad about me. So she's stuck in the wounded ego.
Yeah.
Higher self, a more evolved mom, a more conscious mom would say, my daughter's going to have a better life than I ever had.
Better life than I ever had. Right.
So, you've come, obviously, in my head anyway, to break the cycle.
Yeah.
So with your daughter, you're going to break the cycle. This is a generational thing, and you're changing it up. And so the future for your family life, your future grandchildren are going to benefit from all of the choices that you're making now. So you're a hero, Kathy, and you are also a very good role model.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very interesting exchange, truthful, and you ended up. You answered the question very positively and very honestly, Lisa, and you also made it clear that with some work, it's inevitably it's going to be painful at times, or difficult maybe for Kathy to do it, but she can do it, and you just have to have clarity on what it is that needs to be done, and who you are as an individual, and what work the points. What's the word you use in the book? The inflection points. No, it's not the inflection.
The emotional set points?
The emotional set points, right? The emotional set points that we have, that we operated from in the programming we received, whether it be a tribal or a family type of thing, and what it is that we're expecting to perform as, and what it's actually preventing us from doing. And so that's very, very well described. I was hoping, well, I still think we can. I know I can see that Ingrid has been outside of her camera because she has had these phone calls and stuff. But she and I have talked about substance abuse as an incredibly rampant and serious problem in the society. There's a lot of kids who are now abusing substances way more than in the past. And also they're medicated by the establishment, the medical establishment.
Correct.
And that is creating, I'm sure it's creating a huge problem for those kids and for the families in which they operate. And I was wondering if, since you do talk about it in the book, Quantum Tools to Help You Heal Your Life Now, I think this is a very important topic for a lot of kids in college or wherever.
I think that addiction is very much rooted to abandonment and a sense of lack of connection. They did a bunch of tests on Vietnam veterans that returned home from the war. And they found that the Vietnam veterans that went home to loving families were not addicted to morphine, even though they had been given morphine in the field after an injury.
Okay.
Where in comparison to the Vietnam vets that went home and they had no one, no family, no wife, no mom, no dad, they continued to struggle with addiction. Dr. Diamond is well, I think she's passed on now, but Dr. Diamond is a scientist that worked with rats. And she discovered that rats are very much like human beings. They're pack animals, and they love playfulness, and they love connection, and they thrive. And the rats are very good mothers too. They take incredible care of their pups. And what she did was she isolated rats, and a couple of things. What she did is she took rats and she let them stay by themselves, no toys and no other rats. And they all aged incredibly quickly and ultimately would die, get a disease and die. Then she took some of these rats and added them back to the social experience. Many of them came back. So that's how important connection is. Then she did a very interesting experiment with cocaine-laced water. And so the rats that she put a water bottle laced with cocaine, and the rats that had family and toys never came back to the water. But the rats that were isolated drank themselves to death with the cocaine. So because rats and people and babies are so similar, what she concluded is that the more isolated emotionally, psychologically, even physically and spiritually people are for themselves, as well as other people, the more likely they are to want to dabble with alcohol to numb themselves, or marijuana, or harder drugs, or sex, or gambling.
Right.
And so it's escapism. Escaping from what? Pain. And this is why what I try to do is help people give birth to their own consciousness, so that they understand that, yes, the pain is there, but let's figure out why, and let me teach you how to sit with it and process it, so you no longer have to pretend it doesn't exist and create this need for escapism.
Right. The question that I have, which is a question that Ingrid and I were discussing not too long ago, families, well, individuals within families or individuals have to assess the trauma that they went through, or they're still carrying, or that they need to get out of, and also assess the sort of trauma that their parents inherited.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm glad to see that she's back at her mic and camera. But this is really what we were talking about, which is that unless we get people to understand that they can make a difference in their lives by going to therapy, by connecting with the right form of family counseling. Let's just say counseling first, because it's individual, one-on-one. But it certainly helps to have the family backdrop be clear, so that there's a full picture that emerges to the individuals who's suffering, and to the parents who don't understand. They're kind of unsure as to what they can do. Maybe they need to be present. They would benefit from being presented with their own a sort of narrative of their own families. What do you think on that one?
I think that what we have to understand is that the brain is designed to run away from forest fires, not towards them. So what I mean by that is that we have to understand that there's a process that we're not aware of. Denial is real. So it's a defense mechanism. And so if I have sexual abuse in my past, my brain will bury that until I'm able to process it. So I could be a mom and have severe sexual abuse in my background and raise my children and have tremendous issues around control and being able to let go and be able to have fun. And I could be afraid whenever a man comes into the room, and I can tell my daughters that they should never wear that and they should never say that. And I can be projecting all of my trauma onto my daughter and be completely unaware of it, because my brain runs away from the forest fire, which is the trauma, not towards it. And so it takes, in terms of family therapy, there really has to be an appreciation for understanding that parents and grandparents, their brains may not even be aware that there's trauma.
Correct.
And so the adult child, that's who we call the adult child, which is the adult child of an alcoholic, the adult child of a narcissist, the adult child of an immature parent, the adult child of parents who are just below the veil, as I like to say, parents who made mistakes. and they're unaware of themselves, right? You may
Right.
not be able to get through them. And
Yes.
so that leaves you with an opportunity as well as a choice to heal yourself. Understanding that when you look at your mom and your dad, there's a very good chance that the way the brain is designed, unless they're very aware, because to be aware means I have to be able to sit, pick up the hood, and look at my trauma. But my body and brain is designed to shut that door. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. Never happened. It never happened.
Right,
And
right.
so that's where grace and forgiveness can come in, but it takes a while to get there. I had to forgive my mother. I had to forgive my father and let go. You know, my father's mother committed suicide when he was about 3. You talk to my dad today, he says, "Oh, that didn't bother me. I don't remember her." Yet my father has very high narcissistic traits, and his father was a violent alcoholic and domestically abusive. My father was absolutely affected by his childhood, but he won't go there because he's wired to not go there, to not remember the pain. Can I blame him for that? No. I can accept how being raised by him affected me,
Right,
and
right.
I can deal with the consequences of that. But ultimately, I say, namaste, I understand, you're asleep, and that's okay. And it's not for me to pry that door open and force you to look at your trauma and to pray you're able to deal with those emotions. Because most therapists don't know how to do it.
Most therapists don't know how to
No.
do it.
I would say that, if maybe most is a strong word, a lot of therapists do not know how to help you deal with the way that you feel. They want to try to figure out a way to get you to not feel that or not say that anymore, because they don't really know
Fascinating,
how.
fascinating, fascinating. So essentially, the field needs to be
Felt.
awakened. Awakened.
You got to be, yes, but this is the thing. It's so multi-layered, because you have to understand that once you tap into that fear, you're going to have bodily sensations.
Yes.
The amygdala, the hippocampus, you're going to get flooded with an emotional flashback.
Correct.
You have to know that you're not your feelings, you're not your body, that you are the observer of your feelings, you're the observer of what's happening in your body. What happens with PTSD is that, or when you're angry, is that you have an emotion, you feel it in your body, and you think you are your body. You think you are that emotion. This
Right.
makes you a highly reactive and dysregulated person.
Correct. Yes.
When you start to peel away, consciousness is born, and you start to peel away, you can say, oh, wow, I feel upset. And oh, wow, I feel my heart rate racing. And oh, wow, I feel a little bit of brain fog. Wow, you're now the observer of what you're experiencing. Much different than I'm pissed off and now I'm going to go hit the kids or kick the dog or put a hole in the wall. That's not regulated. You've got to learn how to see your emotions, observe your emotions, and even observe the way your body's reacting. Because if you don't, you are going to freak out because your body feels shaky and I'm so upset, and you're not going to know that that's a normal reaction to stress. And you're not going to know that if you don't separate, if you don't observe, if you don't sit into the seat of the observer, it's going to get worse. You're going to react. You're going to make the situation worse. You're going to make your body worse. You're going to feel more out of control, maybe even pass out. Like, it's going to get worse. And this is what I think a lot of great people of the past, deep thinkers of the past, they didn't have this piece of neurological information, right? They didn't have this unconscious versus consciousness piece of information. So it was difficult to think about the way that you think and think that's it, that's period, end of story, and not to be aware that your thinking process is just a thinking process and you can change it.
Well, I think you're right. I would just say in passing that Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics, they had a certain sense that the body was irrational and could be led irrationally by these emotions, and that the more you could control, observe,
Yes.
and control, through allowing anger directed at you to flow away back from you, or not accepting shame for anything that you were, but only guilt for certain things you could have done wrong, and then accepting it and doing it better. But I think in a way, what we need to do, and I don't mean to correct you, I just want to say our tradition, old tradition from way back, in fact, had it right. It's just that it hadn't been explored in a more rigorous way, which I think is happening today, thanks to people like you in particular, but others prior to you too, that you very nicely outlined in the few emails we had lately.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's, I think it's correct. We have to have, I've always questioned free will, because when I was married and when I really started waking up, I was like, I was not conscious. My choice to marry my ex-husband was not conscious. It was fueled by wanting to please my parents. It was fueled by thinking I had to get married.
Right.
There was no free will in that choice.
No, of course not. Yeah, they were defining you, and I'm just kind of talking to the rest of the students now. This is the dimension of the length of life by Martin Luther King Jr. There is a great text, by the way, Lisa, and Ingrid, I think, might have read it. It's called The Three Dimensions of a Complete Life. And basically he says, look, you are the one in charge of what defines you. You will stumble upon obstacles, but your gifts are your gifts, and let no one define you for yourself. Let no one do that. And so that resonates with what you're saying. Basically, no one can tell you have to marry this one because of whatever, or you have to have this career choice, or you have to do this differently because you're not good enough now. I mean, that sort of nonsense is a complete hindrance to the growth of the self.
I think no one should, but I think that, in family relationships, I'm guilty of that. I tried to steer my son in what I thought was the right direction. I tried to steer my daughter. All parents think that they're doing the right thing. But I do think that there's consciously parenting, looking at the child for innate gifts, looking at what the child gravitates towards, and helping the child, even if it's video games. One thing I wanted my son to, he loved them. And so I said to him, why don't you go to the school called Full Sail in Florida? Learn how to program and actually create video games. Learn all about it. Learn about the industry. So I think that, it's natural and innate for a parent to want to try to teach a child their values. And they're doing it from, a very good place. What else are we supposed to do, right? We have communities of people, right? Orthodox Jewish people, strong Greek Orthodox, right? Think about family religious traditions. Every child born is ushered into a particular religion. Is there choice in that? Are these people wrong for doing it? Not necessarily. They're doing what they believe is right. I think we have to understand that, and understand that there are going to be people who tell you what to do. They are going to try to define your value. They are going to define your worth. You have to know that you have the choice to rebuke that.
Right.
But I do think it's very natural for people who think that they love you to try to get them to do what they think you should do. I think we have to be aware of that, and then my nephew is a perfect example. Here's a kid who loved beats, meaning music beats. And he would say to me, Aunt Lisa, I just don't know. It's like I hear music and I could pick up the beat. And I would say to him, you have to go to music school. Maybe you're supposed to be an audio engineer. Maybe you can work with music production. And my brother said, no, he needs a civil service job. The kid struggles with depression and anxiety. It's like taking a bird and wrapping silk around its wings.
Yeah.
This kid is meant to fly. This is the way this is the direction that he should be going. But his parents, and him wanting to gain his parents' approval, because ultimately that's what all children want, denies himself, thinking, if I align myself with my mom and dad, then I'm good.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Now I've been in and out taking care of stuff, but I've been listening, and I know Dr. Gendry, you wanted me to talk about something, but I can connect with your story, Lisa, and also the student that spoke. You said that you used to write down, you had a journal. Well, I used to keep a journal on the crazy stuff my mother would say.
Yeah.
Because it was literally crazy. I'm not even going to share it because it's like out there.
Yeah.
And then I would keep a date.
Yeah.
Because I started to see a trend.
Yeah.
She always wanted to pick a fight.
Yeah.
With whoever. It just seemed like that is what, kept her blood pumping.
Mm-hmm.
And the behavior was so erratic.
Yeah.
And this awful things. I mean,
Yeah.
and I realized that, okay, this person definitely has a problem. It has anger issues on all the things that you spoke about as far as them having the trauma earlier in life.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that my mom didn't have is my mom didn't have a mother.
Right.
Her mother died when she was 2 years old. And then she had the wicked stepmother.
Yeah.
And she, had her 4 children. My father died, and then she was left with these 4 kids. So the angriness, I hate God, why me, all this stuff happened. And so I felt that every time we had boyfriends or whatever, it's like she hated everybody's boyfriend.
Yeah.
They were not good enough. And she had, I would say this, she had this made up life in her mind that she wanted us all to be. And I also felt too, she was very selfish,
Mm-hmm.
like, and controlling. But, I knew she was my mother, and I knew she had suffered a lot. And so I never let that bother me. Me personally, I could easily hate my mom right now. I could blame her for all these things, but I never went there.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm the youngest. But I have the 2 middle brothers and sisters who they went through a long period of time with this. They hate their mother.
Mm-hmm.
And then the oldest one, she was mother hen. She went through a little bit of it as well. But, it's all this trauma and all the things that you're talking about. I think you're exactly right on. And well, at least in the Latino community, they definitely try to shame you.
Yep.
And I wasn't going to have that.
That's great.
And so, when my mom would say all these things, I would do just like you said. I would just breathe and say, no, I'm 18 years old now.
Yep.
And I can fly planes, and I'm in control of my life. Mm-hmm. So, and then I moved on, I moved forward. But let me tell you, the pressure, the awful things, it continued on.
Yep.
It continued on, even to today.
Oh, yes.
Today. Yeah. So I just have to block that out. And I realized there was no ever trying to change this mentality, this mindset.
No. Of hers.
Yeah, of hers, right.
Because you stuck to very good ethnic ethic values for yourself that are kind of stoic in a way, and I would like you to repeat them for Lisa. She hasn't heard them. I promised myself. Can you do that?
Oh, again, I don't want the kids to be bored with.
That's fine. I have to listen to them one more time.
It's forever. It takes forever.
Just a few. Okay. Well, I think one of the things that popped up for me is that when you have a mother hen, usually the oldest child will buffer a lot of the mother's anger, so that the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth are shielded by the oldest child.
Right.
Which really helps you. Right. So
right.
Maybe you felt like there was a shield between you and your mother because your sister was there.
Right.
So it's not uncommon for the older children to recognize something's up with mom, and they go right into, I have to take on some of mom's attributes, or I have to take on motherly attributes to help my brothers and sisters. This also helps the oldest sibling feel in control over a situation that she's not in control over. the really sad thing is that you have to abandon yourself to do that.
Mhm.
So, I would imagine that your older sister has suffered in ways that she may not even realize.
Oh my gosh, yes, she needs so much therapy. And finally, at an older age, she's finally going to go. And this is the challenge that you were saying, that they've lived this life and they don't see it right in front of them. And even just going to therapy in general for certain communities, that's like,
Yeah.
I'm not crazy.
I have a
I
great
don't need that. I don't need counseling.
I have
And
a grade 12-week class that I coach myself online for this exact issue. So if she's
and that's why I asked you, how old were you when you went to your therapy? I think that's very important. Now, I'd suffered a lot of trauma and I never went to therapy, but I feel like when you are in control, when you move forward, and when you take charge of your life, I mean, it's kind of like your own therapy.
Yeah, I
And
think that there's if you have a good sense of yourself, like, it sounds like you have a good sense of yourself, then you can pick that up and bring that forward. But sometimes people are so broken by the experience of abandonment and then the shouldering of the responsibilities of the siblings that their identity is very fractured, right? And
Right.
then when I'm not taking care of anybody, who am I? So there's this loneliness. And then it's like, if I'm not attracting people who are messed up, I have no value. So once a caretaker, always a caretaker until the caretaker awakens, And so therapy is awesome. I do think it has to be goal-based. When I coach someone, they get homework. Like, I want you to think about this. I want you to journal about that. I want you to bring this up. Tell me about this next time. We're going to review this. So it's really important. But yeah, I would definitely point your sister in the direction of, like, my Facebook group is for children of narcissistic mothers and fathers and adult children of alcoholics. That's why I create the video library I do, because people listen to me and they go, I didn't know I was codependent.
that's right.
I didn't know that the way my mother treated me was wrong. And, like, I abandoned myself and she abandoned me. What happened with your mom was your mom suffered what's called an abandonment wound, an attachment wound. Her mother disappeared. And so at 2 years old, she's still acting like she's 2. Where's my mother?
Right. That's what she is.
Where's my mother? This is unfair. Why does everybody else have a mother and I don't? Why does everybody else get to be happy and I don't? And that's really not her fault. It wasn't dealt with properly. This loss was not dealt with properly. And to make matters worse, she gets married and then her husband dies.
Right.
So now she's a 2-year-old having to take care of four children. And every time they're happy, she's resentful.
Yeah, right. So now she's compounding an anxiety into her own
Yes.
family.
Yeah, you got it, Lisa. You're 100% on. And then my sister gets the middle one gets pregnant and runs away from home.
Yep. And now she feels abandoned by that. So now my daughter left me and she took my grandchild.
Right.
I keep getting abandoned. So this is the karmic wheel. So what ends up happening is the abandonment of mother dying. Then your mother feels the abandonment. And then what ends up happening is she's abandoned herself. And then the way she persecutes people, forces them away, she experiences more abandonment. And then you know what happens? She gets angrier and she pushes more people away. And it's just a vicious cycle until she dies in a nursing home somewhere, yelling at the nurses.
Right. Yeah.
And it's all unconscious.
That's right. It is. You're 100% right on. She doesn't know that. She doesn't know that, and she will never cognitively even understand it.
That's the shame in it.
Right.
That's the shame in it. And that's why all you can do as the daughter of someone like this, with these high mood swings and this inability to understand how her actions are affecting other people, all you can really do is see it and identify it and shield yourself from it. And then learn to heal from it. In other words, like, your sister usually the first child bears the brunt of most of it. The mother is the most immature, The mother expects the most from the oldest child, even after there are more children. And so there's a sense of the older child being unable to attune to mom and to feel connected and loved. And then this constant attempt to acquiesce, make excuses for anything to like try to make my mother happy. And she ends up being completely exhausted and lost, completely lost.
And the other thing too is there's so much in families, not just one ethnic group. I think this happens in all families. They really don't want to acknowledge the truth. You know, like dad was an alcoholic, dad beat up mom. Even, you know, they want to deny, like you earlier were saying, the denial. It's amazing how they want to live in this, you know, this TV show family.
Well, there are so many problems with that.
And that's what I saw growing up. I used to say to my brother all the time, this is not the Partridge Family. You know, this is our family and it's the way it is. This is not TV. And they want to live in this euphoria. And that's what I see now in little social groups.
Yes.
They are in this little bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone is supposed to be so empathetic and everyone's supposed to be so sensitive. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that you're not perfect. But they don't want to, they're in denial. That's what I see. I see a lot of social circles of people that are they're in such denial. Yeah. They're not talking like we are here, sharing real families.
Yeah. Well, this is the way I talk. And people always say that to me. The reason I gravitate towards your work is because you tell it like it is.
That's right.
You know, and I said, it's the only thing that freed me was telling it like it is, you know, and it meant risking my relationships with my mother and father, but I really didn't have a relationship with them anyway.
Right.
It was all superficial. I sat at the table and I made believe I didn't hear the insults. I sat at the table and I made believe I didn't hear the passive aggressive comments. I left the house with my stomach in knots because I just didn't want to tell them how I really felt because I would be seen as the drama queen. So I ate a lot, you know, but there are so many problems because in society we have the models are on TV are 15 and their skin is flawless.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Oh, the other thing too, Lisa, I think not just in families, because all this stuff, the codependency, the narcissism, this happens in families. I have recently started seeing this in friends of mine.
Yeah.
I never realized it was there until now. And you're almost afraid of them. Like you're afraid to tell them because they're so bossy.
Mm-hmm.
And you're an adult now.
Yeah.
You're 50 years old. You know, this lady's 60 years old. Why are you afraid of her? And I saw that because I had a coach for a while and I was telling him about one of my girlfriends that I was trying to help her. And she had divorced her husband. And, you know, since I'm used to helping my mom and stuff like that. So I was helping her and then she was moving and she wanted to bring her things to my house. So, and keep them there in storage just for a little bit because she was moving. So she brought them all over and they're all in the basement. And then it was like, oh, when are you ever going to get your stuff out? Right. But since she had this really bossy personality and it was always, oh, poor me. Oh, poor me. She basically was using me to get her way.
Yeah.
It was basically her crap's still downstairs. It's like 2 years later, I told her you need to get your stuff out by a certain date and she never did. But for a while, I was a little like, you know, afraid of saying, because you know, that medium where I'm trying to help her. Like now I need to sit down and say, look, you got to get your stuff out. Plus my husband was on my ass all the time saying, when is she going to get her stuff out? Right. So I told her she never got her stuff out. It's still downstairs. Some of the crap we just threw out. But what you were saying today, I'm seeing this now, this behavior with some personal friends of mine that I never realized it because I want to be their friend, right? And I bring this up because we're talking about families, but many of us are in friendships with people that we need to reassess.
You have to be, she sounds a lot like your mom.
Yes.
So that's why she's in your life. So she's bossy, she's domineering, and you're trying to be nice to her. You're trying not to upset her. You're trying to give her way. It's poor me. Please understand me. So she's your mom's energy.
Which
This
is
happens-
sucking and drying at the life out of someone.
Yeah. So when we have these experiences as children, very oftentimes, I talk about this in quantum tools, where where what your emotional set point is as a child, you keep attracting into your adult life. So she is the embodiment of your mom. She is just the pattern that you had as a child is showing up in your mom. And if you take a giant step back, you're probably going to see that pattern come out in a lot, where you're trying to be nice to attract why is me, woe is me women, and you think, oh, I'll help them, like you said, because I help my mom. I help my mom. You got to be careful. It's not your job to, you weren't born to be attached to the apron strings of somebody who can't get their shit together.
And I just wanted to bring this up for our students listening, because I saw that, and I knew immediately I need to stay away from this person. This is not good for me.
That's it, the boundary.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. And I think once again, it's a denial. And one of the things the life coach said to me, which I'll always remember, and maybe you say this to your clients, is, what are you getting out of this relationship?
That's right.
And I thought about that question, and she was so crazy, my friend. I said, you know what? It's almost like entertainment.
Right.
And she would tell me that, and I'm listening, and then I was helping her, like you were saying, but I realized that this isn't good. This isn't a good relationship, and I needed to move on. And breaking up is always hard. Breaking up in any relationship, whether it's your girlfriend or boyfriend, or just breaking up, a friendship in general. I think people have challenges with that. And how do you go about doing that? How do you go about when someone keeps pressuring and pressuring and pressuring, and then you have to, just not pick up the phone calls? Remember, Dr. Drenger, we talked about that aggressive person. When are they going to get the message? And for some people, this is hard.
I think it's naturally very, very hard. Well, I think in terms of denial, I think we have a system or a matrix that's a basic illusion, and when you're unconscious, you fall for the illusion. So you think that everyone is supposed to look like they're 15 forever, right? So this idea of we should be perfect, and successful people live a certain way, and successful people have a certain amount of money. And if you're successful, you belong to that country club. And if you're successful, you do this. And so there's constant trying to measure up against someone else, which I think is highly dysfunctional. Inside families, daughters are compared to the other daughters, sons are compared to other sons, you're compared to your cousins, right? This is comparing, shopping for personality traits, right? And comparing you. Mm-hmm. And so I think when it comes to, like you were talking about, social circles and how this is trying to be perfect, it's part of society's unconsciousness, where we're all built to appear perfect. And again, it's codependency is breathed into us from like the time we're born, right? So many people say, oh, she's cute, newborn, oh, she's cute, or that baby's not cute. We judge babies right away. Right? Yeah, we judge them right away, like, oh, I don't know, I don't know about the nose, like it's terrible. And so babies are born with, and we're value judging them immediately, and it's so dysfunctional, right? We got to stop judging people, primarily judging ourselves, so to stop that. And then it's easier for us to stop judging other people. But the people who are trying to pretend to be perfect, they're part of this society. They think that's the goal. The goal is to convince. I think it's, when I started processing, it freaked me the hell out, because I was like, oh my God, my mother taught me to worry about what the man across the street thinks of me. I'm never going to be in his head, so I'm never going to know what the fuck he thinks about me. What am I doing? In my head, I'm hoping that this person that I don't know is accepting of me. This person might act like they accept me and hate me. So my mother teaches me to be completely consumed about what other people might think about me. So now something that's not tangible, something that I will never be certain of, has now become my goal. No wonder I felt batshit crazy.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Oh, okay. Well, what are they going to think? I don't know. Like, well, oh, you have to worry about what they think. And as I got older, when you're a child, you don't know that what someone thinks you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know that it's absolutely insanity to be taught to be worried about what people think, because you can't control what people think.
That's right. We're going back to really explaining again the Stoics. The Stoics are such important philosophers, and basically you rekindle their teachings in a very concrete, very approachable way, and it is fascinating that this is happening. So I just think, unfortunately, we have to wrap it up because we're past our time by 5 minutes. So this recording will be made available. I will send it to the students in this class. All of you on the call now will be able to listen to it again. And maybe what we'll do when we meet again, which is going to be on the 22nd with Lisa. Thankfully, she's coming back to us. There are going to be a few questions, specific to what happened in this exchange and what she says in her book. And so we're going to do that in preparation for the next meeting on the 22nd. Okay? So I'm just going to call it a day. Thank you to all for being on this call. And I'll see you, the students, I will see you again on Wednesday at the same time. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So Lisa, I'll see you in a minute on the other channel. Okay.
I will. Okay. Bye now.